Hello and welcome to our second demo. If you haven't yet, please make sure that you've downloaded and open this file, Demo2 Illustrator file. We need to make sure we're taking good notes. It's for points, but also so when you're working outside of class and you need help, you don't have to watch this video all the way through. But it is here if you need it. So we have this file open. And let's do what we did last time. Let's just make sure our workspace is all similar and correct. So I'm going to go and do what we did last time when I went to Windows, Workspace, and then I set it on Essentials Classic, or I reset it because there's different, layouts that you can work in. The tools are moved around slightly. So let's do Essentials Classic, and I'm already there, nothing moved around, but maybe somebody came in and moved stuff around on you. So we did that. You don't always have to work in Essentials Classic, but it's just going to help if we both have the tools in the same spot. Let's set up a few other things. So I'm going to go to View, and I'm going to go click on Smart Guides. So I'm going to go make sure I got Smart Guides, go View, Smart Guides, there's a little check mark there. And sometimes you'll see these kind of lines will start to pop up. These pink lines usually are kind of a magenta colors, or sometimes they'll tell you like the distance between that. So the smart guides are really helpful to kind of make things aligned and centered, make sure things are distributed about the same distance. Other things to kind of check for. We're not going to use them right now. So if we go down here where it says Show Grid, Snap Grid, if there's any check marks there, let's go and click and make sure that there's none of those check marks, because you might have noticed this last time. There was snap to grid, snap to points, and maybe you were trying to use the pen tool and it was moving weird, and I came over and helped you out, and that's because you had it snapping to these different units of measurement. Okay, so we've made our workspace, we got our smart guides on, we got everything else off. Let's go and get working. So I'm going to go click on this image on the left. It's actually not an artboard, it's just a JPEG. I wanted to talk about some color stuff first. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to zoom in, and remember, Command plus to zoom in, Command minus to zoom out, or Control if you're on a PC. So let's talk about this. I wanted to briefly talk about color for printing, color for screens. I set up this workspace for it to be in what's called CMYK. You can also set up your workspace to be in RGB. So there are these two different ways of doing color. CMYK is for printing, over here on the left. And when you're using a printer, it's going to be printing little layers of magenta, cyan, yellow, and then what's called the key, which is black. So there's that blue, yellow, red, and on top of that's black. And that's how we see all the colors. It's just actually a bunch of little dots. What's coming out of our screen, the light coming out of our screen, is actually on a whole different color system. This is additive light, where if you could be able to see this, if you could be able to distinguish the different beams of light, there's some green, blue, and red, and all those colors, all those beams of light are mixing together to make all the colors you see. So when we're printing, we need to make sure that we're in CMYK. And that means our colors are going to be a little less wide than light, and they're also going to layer a little bit differently. So hopefully that's starting to kind of make sense. It's going to make more sense here in 1 second. So let's go to artboard number 1. I'm going to go click on the artboard flyout menu. I'm going to double click on it and go there. So here I have a rich black and what's called 100K black. And right now they look the same. And this is an issue with a lot of people. This has this issue with printing. You think these are the same black, but they're in fact not. Okay, we're gonna figure this out really quickly. Maybe on your computer, the settings I'm going to put in there have already been done, and you're not having an issue with this. But maybe you've just downloaded Adobe Illustrator, and you're going to be running into this issue when you print, where you have different shades of black. Okay, so let's go and fix this really quick. So we're going to go to Illustrator, and then there's Settings, or maybe Preferences if you're on a PC. And we have all these different settings that pop up. If you click to general, this whole thing's going to pop up. You're going to see this list again, or we can just go down to appearance of black. So Illustrator, settings, appearance of black. So these preferences pop up, and what we can see here is that we got these examples. The 100% K, 100% black, is actually a little lighter than what's called a rich black. And if you're seeing it and they're the same black, it's because your screen on screen is set to view everything as a rich black. So let's go and switch that to view all those different blacks as the same. Let's go switch it to view all those different values as accurate. So display all blacks accurately. And then depending on how your output is, you could do it for its accurately, but I like to keep it as rich black. So hopefully it prints and it's going to be darker. We're going to be seeing the values accurately. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK. And you can see that this circle became a little bit lighter than that circle. So I'm going to click on this circle. Let's do this. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to go over to the fill. I'm going to double click on our fill. This little color window pops out, or I could change the color. We talked about this before. But let's look at this really quick. So we have a hex code here. This is kind of a number that relates to our color. And then over here we got our ratios of cyan, blue, magenta, that kind of red, yellow, and key. So we can see that K black, 100%, has 100% key. Okay. If we go over, do the same thing, click on the rich black, click on that little fill so it pops out, and we can see that, in fact, our hex code has changed. It's now 00000. Instead of it was like a number letter correlation. And our amounts have changed. So this is something very important to write down in your notes. If you want it to be a rich black and to print nice and dark as you're probably going to get it with a digital printer, we need to have these ratios. Cyan's got to be 60%, magenta's 40, yellow's 40, and key is 100%. So what that's going to do is when it's printing, it's going to print a little bit of cyan, a little bit of magenta, a little bit of yellow, and then black on top of that. So it's going to look richer than if you didn't have all those colors underneath that black. It's like a pro tip. We're going to have a critique down the road, and somebody's not going to do this, and we're all going to point it out because we're going to tell because there'll be different values of black. Okay, so if I wanted to go change this black to a nice rich black, it'd be very easy to do. I can click on that circle. I could use my eyedropper tool, right? I got my circle selected. I could use that eyedropper tool, which the hotkey is I. I could go click on it. That's one way of doing it. Or what I could also do is I could take my color, that rich black that I got, and I could save it for later, because you probably don't want to use that eyedropper tool if you got a bunch of things that you're going to need to color. So over here we have different ways of picking colors. We got that big color guide where we can go and select different colors. We have another color guide. The first one is called color, but color guide where it's going to have tints and shades and color harmonies based on a color. Can be kind of helpful. I don't use it a ton. Then we got swatches, and I do use swatches quite a bit. There's libraries of color harmonies. We'll get into that more in here. You can build your own color harmonies and save them for later. One thing I like to do in swatches is I'll save a color if I'm going to use it a lot in a project, so I don't have to use that eyedropper tool all the time. So it's pretty easy. I can go hold down on that fill, the black fill, and if I go and I drag, you can see that there's a little plus sign. I can go and drag it into my swatches. And for this project, I got the color there. I could even double click on that color. It's got a name there. I could title it Rich Black if I wanted to. If I wanted it to add it to my library on all my projects, I could click Add to Library or Add to different types of libraries. We're not going to get that too much into the weeds, but you could make different workstations and have different libraries and set them all up. But I'm just going to hit OK. And now I got that ridge black if I ever do need it. Okay. So I don't have to use a color picker or have to go change those settings every time. But definitely write that down. 60, 40, 40, 100 to get ridge black. Okay. So sorry for the super nerd stuff right off the bat. We talked a little bit about the differences between those two. On our upcoming projects, if you're going to be printing set in black, it needs to be ridge black. Okay, so let's go to our next artboard. I'm going to go to artboards, jump to there. And what we're going to do on this artboard, I know this is going to be a little bit basic. If you've taken one of the other classes with me, you've covered some of this stuff. But take good notes, there might be some new tricks. We're going to be talking about some of the different alignment tools, different distributing tools. So we're on artboard number 2. If you haven't seen already, I got 2 layers going on here. I got those sub layers underneath. I have a locked layer, which is everything that we can see for the most part. That's all locked down. And then I have a working layer where there's a couple shapes here and there, like these circles. Maybe you try to move some text around or something, I don't know. And you realize that some of that was actually locked down. And just to kind of give a little bit more detail about these layers, we're going to get into it. You can always double click on that image of a layer, that kind of thumbnail, and you could change the title. You can change the color. Sometimes you will go change these settings below. Sometimes I'll have like a graphite sketch. I'll make sure that the print is selected off so it doesn't print. So there's settings that we can go and adjust. You can see in my working one, I have that set up to print. It's not locked. So you can get a little bit more fine tuning if you need that. Okay, so what we're going to do over here is we're going to make some shapes. So we have probably not used this tool yet as of the last demo. There is a whole bunch of different shapes tools. So if you go under the T for text, we'll get to that in a demo or two. We have different shapes. We got rectangles. There's that guy. We got a rounded rectangle. If we're making a shape, we can click and drag. If we're holding down Shift, it's going to keep it proportionate. It's going to keep it as a square. The rounded rectangles have these little, I'm going to zoom in, have these little kind of bullseyes on the corners. And you can click on those. You can pull them in or pull them out. You could also hold down Option and click on 1 or 2 and pull it in or out. But we have this ability to go and round those more. You might be messing around with that when we were working with points and paths in the last demo. We got ellipses, which we'll use here in a second. There's a polygon tool. So all these tools as well. If I could drag and make a shape, but if I click, I could put in the size manually. So maybe I wanted to make a shape that is a 1/2 inch from the radius. And right now I'm going to make a 6-sided shape, but what if I wanted to make a triangle? I can go down to 3, right? I can't go any lower than 3. There's not a 2-sided shape. And there we go. We got a triangle. Okay. And I can round those corners yet again. Okay. I know, super exciting stuff. There's a star. You can do the same thing where you can go and add different points, change the amount of space between the inside and the outside. Beautiful star. Great stuff. And then after that, we have the flare tool, which you can go and make these kind of lens flares. You can adjust them. You can play around with opacity. I really probably wouldn't recommend using this too much. It can be used for some things, but they do look very dated at this point. They look dated about 10 years ago. Sometimes they could be used for good, but it is kind of one of those almost the cliches when you see them sometimes if they're not done right. So don't even worry about that one. Don't think about it right now. But let's go do this. Let's go grab our ellipse. I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to make a circle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one circle, and I'm going to go copy my circle. So I could hit Command C to copy and Command V to paste it, but I'm just going to hold down Option. Click and drag. If I'm holding down Option, you see as I start to drag while I'm holding Option down or Alt for you PC people, it's going to duplicate. So let's get 3 circles kind of like that. You know, those smart guides, you can see those magenta lines popping up telling me where stuff are kind of related to other things, which is kind of helpful. Sometimes it's annoying for some people, but you know how to turn them off. And if I wanted to center stuff up, I could guesstimate. There are some rulers and stuff that we could use, but there's some really easy ways of centering things and distribute them. So let's go do this. I'm going to go with my selection tool, selected, the hotkeys V. I'm going to go click and drag over those 3 shapes. Actually, I'm going to move them around because I had it looking too clean to begin with. So if I wanted to go and make these all center aligned and looking sharp, it's very easy to do. I click and drag over all of them. And then up here at the top, we got some different properties that pop up. It's also down here on the side. So what we could do is we can go, and the first 6 are dealing with aligning. So I could align stuff to the left, align stuff to the right. I'm going to go click center align. And now they're all nice in a straight row. You could do the same thing. You could center align them the other way, but now they're all stacked on top of one another. Kind of pointless right now. So let's not worry about that. So the first 6 are dealing with aligning, either vertically or horizontally. The next 6 are going to be dealing with distributing. So if I go to that middle one, distribute in the center, that middle dot, bam, goes right to the middle. So it's really easy to go. If you got a bunch of stuff, you need to put them in a row. Just click the right buttons and there you go. So it's a pretty easy program to keep things clean, work really quickly and effectively that way. Okay, so I'm going to go duplicate maybe another circle, bring it down here. I'm going to make this guy a little bit bigger. So holding down Shift, clicking on one of those corners and dragging. And then I'm going to go and make 3 of them. So I'm going to make kind of a similar triple circle, Triforce thing. I can't remember what they're called over here. So we got these 3 circles, kind of like what's happening up in the corner. And then let's do this. Let's go. And we're going to make these circles transparent. So I'm going to go drag over all 3 of them. I'm going to select all 3. And then up at the top, right, we got these different ways of aligning. And then we have opacity. So I can use this slider if I wanted to, or I can go type into that, maybe just 50%. Boom. Okay, we could even these up. Use those guides a little bit, those smart guides, to kind of help us out. Decent. Okay, so we got these 3 transparent blacks. And I'm going to go and I'm going to use my eyedropper tool. And I'm going to grab the colors from up here. So I have my bottom right selected. Going to make that magenta. Going to make the one yellow. Make the one blue. So we can see how these colors are playing because they're transparent, how they're changing over top of one another, and the different ratios of transparency, how they work. Okay. So I wanted to do this for another reason. I'm going to go open up my layers a little bit more. We can see at the very top, I have these different layers. I'm just going to make this one black so you can see it really quickly. So if I wanted to see something below it, right, I can go and adjust where those objects are in the layers. So I can go click on it and I can drag them up or down. So we can lock a layer. It's pretty evident. We can retitle a layer. You can do a quick selection of a layer by clicking that little dot where there's a click to target. So that's a little bit easier to click to target and then move it around. But what's on top is going to be on top. What's below it's below it. Other things, if I go and I double click on an object, this might have already happened last time, I'm going to go and isolate that layer. I can keep on doing that, get way down into my sub layers. If this pops up where everything starts to become a little bit transparent and you start to see this bar at the top, we can just click the back button a few times and get out of that. But sometimes you got an object or a drawing where there's a lot of sub layers. So you might need to keep on double clicking to go down and find that one and edit it. You might get a little lost when you got a lot of layers going on. So that's an option too. Another thing we could do, if we got a lot of layers and we just need to take something from the top and send it to the back, so we can always right click. If you got a mouse that can right click, this flyout window pops up. I can go to arrange and send things backwards, send things to the front. I can send it down a line one step, like so. That's a hotkey too. I can never remember those hotkeys, but you could use them if you're moving around, moving things up and down a lot. But sometimes I'll just go and right click, click arrange, and send stuff to the back if I got to do stuff quickly. So as we go farther down this kind of demo, you might see me do that, or I might say I'm doing that. So that's an option. Okay, so we got these three guys here. Let's go. I'm going to make this guy 50% again, transparency, that top black. And what we're going to do next is we're going to go mess around with gradients. So we've talked about swatches, right? Where we can go and adjust colors, pick a color, or you can go and double click on our fill and find a color. Talked about that before. I know, really crazy stuff way out there. But let's talk about gradients. And yeah, I know Illustrator is a little bit over-designed at times, it feels like, because we have a gradient button over here on the left, and we have a gradient button on the right, and sometimes there's a gradient button on the top. But I'm just going to stick with this one over here on the right. They're similar, they're different. This one's a little bit more detailed, so I like this one. So this flyout window pops up. And if I need to go put a gradient on something, I can go drag it down there. There's a gradient. If you click on the one on the left, it's going to be just a tool. I like this flyout window a little bit better. So we have a couple different gradients. The first one we got selected probably is a linear gradient. It's a line. So you can see I can move that slider around. I could change the colors by double clicking on one of the dots and picking a color, or I could use the eyedropper tool. If I want to add a color, it's pretty easy. I just go to my line, I click on it, a color pops up. I can go pick that one. If I want to delete a color, I can just click it, drag one of those dots away. So this is pretty easy. You can change the angle a little bit if you wanted to. That's one way of doing it. Okay, just for the sake of showing you, so if I go over here and I click on that gradient tool, make sure I got the right guy selected, this bar pops up and I can move those around over here, and there are ways to rotate that gradient. Some people like this one. I'm kind of used to more of the flyout window over here. It's a little bit more old school. There's some other things you can get to with the flyout window. I think that's a little bit easier than just using this bar. Okay, so let's go do this. Let's go and jump to this next one. And we're going to go click on that flyout on the right for gradients. And this time let's do a radial gradient. Change up our colors. So I don't use this one a ton, but it does exist. If you want to put something in the center and have it radiate out from there. Okay. You can always click that edit gradient button. Sorry, it's like 6 different ways of doing the same thing, and we can use that slider. So that's kind of why I prefer over here. This one's a little bit more clunkier. It's the same thing, but it's just getting at a different way. Anyways, so we got that radial gradient. And let's just go see this last one. This is my favorite one of the bunch. Click on that last circle, and let's go click on, up top, the freeform gradient. So the freeform gradient's cool because it's going to create these different dots, and we can move them around. You can click on a dot and delete a dot. You can click somewhere and just add something there. So we got these dots we can move around. This is really great for kind of more subtle gradients. If you want to make stuff look a little bit more photorealistic with shadows, this is the tool to use. So just to kind of go over that, we've used both the linear one, the radial one, and the freeform. And I kind of like the flyout window over here just to kind of get started. There's a little bit more sliders and stuff. You can fine tune it a little bit easier. Okay, let's go to our next artboard. Artboard number 3. We're making good time on this one. This time, I'm going to go and I'm going to use the Shape Builder tool. Okay, so I'm going to grab my normal selection tool. We're going to do what's happened to these different circles up top. And if you notice, all of them are locked except this one circle here. So let's go take this circle. I'm going to go bring it down. Let's duplicate it out. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to leave it up there too. So if you got one up here for later, that's great. We have 3 circles down here. We'll move on to the next step. So I'm going to go make this kind of cloud shape similar to what's going on up top in the top left. Kind of even things out using those distributing tools and aligning tools. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine these shapes. So it's pretty easy to do. I'm going to go and I'm going to click and drag over all 3 of them, just select them. And I'm going to use the Shape Builder tool. So the Shape Builder tool, if we go down from our selection tool, it's underneath that width tool that we used the other day. The hotkey is Shift M, and we have our Shape Builder tool. So this one is similar to another tool, the Pathfinder. The kind of cool thing about this is that all the tools are kind of built into this one. So this is like 4 different steps of the Pathfinder. The Pathfinder's over here, and kind of all that stuff is built into this one tool. It's a little bit of a newer tool. Okay, so if I wanted to go and connect them, you can see now that I'm going over these different sections, they're getting highlighted. But right now there's a little plus sign, and if I go and draw over all these different sections, it makes it one big shape. So if you go and draw all over them with the plus, it's going to combine them together. I'm going to go make that black. Let's go do our next one. We're going to talk about extruding. So I'm going to go take this circle yet again. I'm going to go copy it by holding down Option, and let's go make just 2 circles this time. So we got to go, we're going to go select all 3 like I did here, or all 2. And I'm going to go back up to that Shape Builder tool. And this time, instead of going and scrubbing, I'm going to go and just click in the middle. Okay? So I'm going to click in the middle between those 2 circles where it's now a little bit darker. And what that did, if I go and if I click on my selection tool, I click off to the side and then I go click back on, it's now and chopped them like a cookie cutter. So you can put a shape on top of them. If there's things that overlap, you can go and cut it out just by clicking on that shape in between. So maybe I'm going to go grab this. I'm going to use my eyedropper tool, grab one of those really gross looking gradients, put it on top of that. Let's go and do one last thing on this page. We're going to go and use that tool to delete. So I'm going to go make multiple yet again. Take my circles. I'm going to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 circles this time. So I got 5 circles or whatnot. Going to try to have them evenly spaced out, kind of like what I got going up top. For that smart guy, it's kind of nice. Good enough. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to use that tool to subtract. So remember the first one, if we go draw all over them, that's going to add them together. Click once to extrude. This one, select them all again. Get my Shape Builder tool. And if I hold down Option or Alt, if you're on a PC, Option or Alt, you can see that that little plus sign turns to a minus sign. And now I can go and click on the shapes, and instead of extruding them, it's going to cut them out. So let's go. We got that shape. I'm going to fill it in, and voila. it's kind of combined these, but it's also subtracted the things in between. So if you need to have a logo where there's everything combined, but certain elements are cut out, it's a pretty easy shape to kind of, or pretty easy tool to kind of do that, the Shape Builder tool. Now I'm going to show one other tool before we jump to the next page. If you have something that's a compound path, so now we have multiple paths, right, with multiple anchor points, and they're all connected together, and you want to color it, but you keep on trying to color it, it keeps on doing weird things, but you only want to color one section at a time, not the whole group, you're going to need to use the Live Paint Bucket. So underneath that Shape Builder tool, if you click and hold down, there is the Live Paint Bucket. Now the Live Paint Bucket is going to be slightly different than a paint bucket you've used in Procreate or maybe MS Paint or Photoshop. So what it's going to do is it's only going to fill in a closed path. It's not going to fill in a background. It can't do that. It's only going to fill in a closed path. So I'm going to go grab a color, and you can see that we have those closed paths and that big object that's a bunch of different paths that are connected together. So we can go and now fill those in pretty easily. So this isn't good for, doing backgrounds and stuff, but if you got a complicated compound path where there's multiple shapes connected, use that Live Paint Bucket. Okay, so we combined, extruded, and deleted. And let's go on to the final boss for today. We're going to go, and we're going to take this hot mess of lines down the bottom right and turn it into this weird looking character that I made in 2 minutes. He's kind of busted, but at the same time, didn't really spend much time on him. But we're going to do some layering. We're going to use some of the tools that we've learned about today and make this character. He's kind of creeping me out. He's kind of staring at me. Anyways, so if we go and look at our layers, this guy is locked, but all these different lines are able to be edited. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go maybe zoom in a little bit so we can kind of see what we're doing. So I'm going to use some of those new tools that we just learned about, the Shape Builder tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and use that to delete part of this line that's kind of like a sad mouth. I don't know what I was thinking with this guy. He's wearing a hat. He's looking kind of bummed. Whatever. Serves the purpose. So I'm going to go and I'm going to go select just that mouth line and the circle kind of egg shape for the head. So you could hold down Shift and click the two, or you could drag over them. Either way is going to select multiple. And then I'm going to go grab my Shape Builder tool. And I'm going to want to delete. So remember, if we hold down Option, it's going to be a minus sign. A lot of different tools are like that. If you hold down Option, it'll switch it to Subtract. And I can go draw over that part of the mouth that's sticking out, and it's going to go cut it to the circle. Okay. So we've done that. We've made that mouth shorter now. Let's go and adjust the ear. So I'm going to click on this ear, and then I'm going to go hold down Shift and click on the brim of this top hat. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go grab my Shape Builder tool, hold down Option, and I'm going to go make sure that ear's popping out there. So I'm going to hold down Option, go and draw over that little tiny line, and then the ear's popping out. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to combine some things to make the hat. So I'm going to go grab the top of the hat. I'm going to go grab the brim. And this time I'm going to use that Shape Builder yet again. And I'm going to go and combine them. So if you remember how to do that, we're going to just hold down and drag across. We don't need to hold any of the buttons. Just hold down the mouse, scrub across those two shapes, and we'll have those. So now we got a couple shapes that are stacked. We got a hat, we got a head shape, we got this ear, and we can start to go and build from there. So I've done this before. Your workflow will make more sense once you do this a couple of times. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to go grab my head shape, and I'm going to go actually duplicate a couple of them. Maybe 3. Because if we go and look in our layers, in that locked layer, you can see that I actually have quite a few layers stacked on top of one another to make this guy over here. So I got one layer that is a blue. It's kind of light blue. And then what I did from that, then there's also this kind of shadow layer. And how I made that was I took my circle, I put it over top of another circle to make that kind of crescent moon looking shape. I selected the two, and then I grabbed my pathfinder to go and subtract it by holding down Option and cutting from there. I'm going to go select that purple with the eyedropper, and then I got some of those shapes going on. So I got the color, but if I go and I put it there, it's going on top of everything. So let's go into our layers, and I'm actually just going to click that right button, go to arrange, and send it behind everything. So we got our base color here. We got our hat that we're going to deal with next. I'm going to just go click the hat, eyedropper it, grab the other color of that other hat. Let's grab our nose, and let's do the same thing. I'm going to go send the nose out. I'm going to copy out a couple noses. It's time for that shadow shape. And then for the color, or vice versa. So I'm going to make a shadow shape by selecting those two, holding down Option, and subtracting with that shape builder tool. And I'm getting my colors in order. Putting it on top of that nose. So I'm working on layering different colors. You can layer colors and textures and have different transparencies, and the illustration will look more dynamic. And then let's go grab my nose underneath everything else and drag it to the top. Okay. So we should have something that's starting to look kind of similar to what we got up top there. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what we did last time, which was pretty simple. I'm going to go and click on these different paths, and I'm going to go grab our width tool. Remember that hotkey is Shift W. The width tool is right above that shape builder tool. And I'm going to go maybe make some of these paths a little bit bigger. Give it a little bit of line variation to it. So I'm going to start to do that. I'm going to go over to our strokes here, show options, and remember I'm going to go cap it. Gotta make sure we have a rounded cap like last time. But if you want to take a couple minutes and go and adjust some of the thicknesses, adjust the widths to kind of feel more like what we got happening over here with the guy at the top. So as you can see, I'm kind of hopping around. I got that kind of black line art, and I'm grabbing my width tool. I'm adjusting things just slightly. So I'm doing that. Even going to do it to that eye, which I need to make the inside of that eyeball maybe a white. It's kind of a red white. There we go. So use that width tool, give it some variation throughout. kind of continue to build that skill. Mine's a little bit funkier than the last one. I'm going to do it to this ear too. So give a little line variation to everything. Remember to always change those caps, and that'll make life a little easier. And once we have our second weird looking hat man, we got this all done. We've talked about the differences in CMYK and RGB. We talked about how to set up things for rich black, which we need to make sure we have that written down. We played with alignment tools. We played with gradient basics. We talked about those different shape builder tools. And then we kind of added some line weight to a character, kind of layered it up. So hopefully this is kind of helpful. Eventually down the road, we're going to be, having some line work, having some color work, kind of marrying those two together. So we're going to have to play around with that layers. And hopefully this will make more sound designs for this upcoming project. Okay, so once we got that, let's save this. So we would save it in the type of saving that needs to be done for printing. So I'm going to go click File. I'm going to go hit Save As. And then I'm going to save my document, title it up with your name, and let's go save it as a PDF. Remember, AI files or Illustrator files to edit. PDFs are for printing. So I'm going to go save it. I have a newer version of Adobe. It's wanting me to go make a link. I don't need to do that right now. So I'm going to hit continue because Adobe's got a new linked PDF thing that they're trying to get everybody to do. But we need to print this. So let's talk about some of these fine-tuning, saving things just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page. Right now we have the Illustrator default. If you need to print, please go save for a high quality print. You can see these options down here changed a little bit. If you ever want somebody not to be able to edit your design, you can always go click off the Preserve Illustrator capabilities. And that's going to kind of flatten it so you can and be ensured that somebody won't crack this thing open and edit it. But I'm going to leave that on. I'm going to hit Save PDF. And you can go upload that. Call me over. We'll be looking at sketches or the next homework checkpoint. And I will see you on YouTube soon. Bye.